Welcome back to the Check with Joseki Tech. I'm Adam Sedley, and we're here today to discuss a session from Optimove Connect 2025. Today, we're going to be looking at their recurring theme of the positionless marketing with a presentation from FDJ United's Georgi Pepelyankov, their head of marketing transformation, and Rachel Parker, their global head of customer marketing. They entitled their presentation, the FDJ United's MarTech transformation journey to positionless marketing. So I'd like to start this by saying I was really impressed with this presentation. The lengths and strides that they've brought their organization through this transformation are very impressive. And I really recognize the amount of work this takes, both from organizational dynamics as well as having, the right folks in the right chairs to get a lot of little hard problems solved. So kudos to them for the achievements that they made. For those that aren't aware, FDJ is a large gaming operator, but the problems that they're having are really not anything that's unique to their industry at all. And what were the problems that they were sort of approaching initially? It's the same sort of things we're all seeing. They need to see an increased speed to market. They need to get a streamlined process. They need to have a lower error rate with their problems. And the bottom line always matters: increase the ROI, improve customer retention. So they were looking at that as sort of their baseline of where they wanted to get to. With that, a lot of the problems they were seeing were around their time to market and the complexity they had in their process. So they described that, and they were saying it was taking 6 weeks from ideation to being in market. And that sounds like a long time, but when they broke it up into the steps, it really sounded very similar to what we see at a lot of our clients. They had a big process for doing briefs that were very important, where they had up to 5 briefs that needed to be included. So that was a week or two, and a process nobody really enjoyed. Then you had to do a prioritization. Since they had so many ongoing campaigns and the time frames were long, they had to make sure they were doing the right ones. Makes sense? That added a couple of weeks. Then they had to get the copy and the assets done, another couple of weeks. By the time it came time to build the tool, build the campaign, it was a day to bang it out. So where they wanted to get and where they did get was from that 6-week process to a 24-hour turnaround, which I think is really a kind of incredible goal, but I think is one that we can achieve in a lot of organizations, especially those that have the right tool sets like Optimove, where the practical effects of it are really possible. So we're just going to have to look at how we get there. So that brought us to Georgi talking through some of their transformation principles. And I think these were also very good generalized ways to think about how we should approach our processing and marketing operations. So first you have to standardize, then you move to automate, then you move to optimize. Now you're never going to be able to do these completely for all aspects, but you got to look at your processes to make sure that you're following these. So certainly standardize is very important. We need to make sure that all the members of our team are doing things in similar manners. Once we see what those look like, there will be some clear things that hop out we can automate to save time. The big example that they had with automation was their welcome stream. They had 32 hours a month was what it was taking for their account managers to do their onboarding streams, and they were able to automate that down to a task that they didn't need to take at all. And then optimize, what are the things we can just improve upon to actually do it better. So breaking everything up into those 3 lanes, I think, is really a strong starting point for the analysis. From there, another point that was brought out, which I also think is really critical, is the move from assembly line to autonomous to automated, in the 3 steps toward making things faster and better. And I think the assembly line, this is a problem that we see in all organizations where they have a lot of different siloed skills. So you have to go to one team to do the targeting, you have to go to another team to do the creative, you have to go to a third team for your test preparation so your analysis works out right, and then the marketing operations elements are a 4th team on top of that. So a lot of times, all these different skill sets, which are unique to individual teams, have to happen in serial order. So this big process with briefs is because each team needed its own brief around the same campaign. And then each team needed their work prioritized to go off. The move to autonomous really allows all of that serial work and all those handoffs to just be in one person's plate at one time. And that is going to smooth things along. When they need something to get done, they can get all those little pieces done by themselves. And that's really, I think, the core of what we wind up talking about when we say positionless marketing is, does the marketer have that autonomy of action? They can get all the things done. For those of us that have been in Optimove, we all know a target group can take you 15 minutes. It can take you, a couple of hours, but it's not a big process. Scheduling the campaign is 15 minutes. If your creative is simple, you can do that pretty quick. You can get a lot of creative done in an hour as long as you've got the assets you need ahead of time. So you really can get a campaign out there, soup to nuts, pretty quickly, as long as you're teed up and ready to go. So that's where we really hit with the biggest rub, is in large organizations where you do have these other teams, sometimes as an organizational dynamic, they can't be left out. So I don't know if you're like me, but I've gotten my hand slapped more than once by the creative team because I wanted my creative to just be simple, to get it good enough to get it out in the field, and they wanted to be included more in the process. So that's appropriate. I won't hazard for a second to say that the creative guys aren't better at doing the creative than our team is, but sometimes we can't wait 2 weeks or we can't wait a month to get the result. We want to get the campaign out. So I do think something that's very critical as we enter this whole process is to step back and step up in the food chain to say, if we want to get to a one-day turnaround, there's going to be a certain amount of doing things less than we did before. That's going to be compensated by having more campaigns and quicker campaigns. And a theme that I'm going to keep pushing on whenever we bring up positionless marketing is the idea of agile marketing. It's not just about having one person be able to do the whole job, but understanding that the whole process needs to be quicker. And autonomy is only one of the ways that we really get there. It's really that autonomy about the decision making that's also going to be important. And also in that same spirit of agile is having a minimum viable campaign where we can say, okay, I'll get the campaign out. It won't be the best it can possibly be, but it'll be in the market. So I got to get more campaigns out there. And then the ones that are winners, I can take those and optimize those to have better creative, tighter targeting, et cetera, et cetera. But let's make sure we can get the good ideas to the field as quickly as we can, because truth be told, we don't really know which ideas are going to be winners and which ones aren't until we really test them out in the field. So they had this process in place to go through all of the items and work through the systems, and that was assuredly a lot of work. They worked, some of the things that they were able to do was remove a lot of what they had in terms of self-made complexity. So they found that they had a lot of systems that were doing the same job, so they removed those overlaps. Toward getting autonomy, they reduced the number of decision makers along the way, right? You got to streamline it. The more I have to wait for the other team to come up with things, the more I'm going to have to wait. They also looked at their workflows from scratch to reimagine them. Again, it's got to be a restructure if you're ever going to go from 6 weeks to 6 hours worth of development. Other things along the way, they're deprioritizing their lower value edge cases, which is always a good target. The things that just aren't going to make money, just skip them. And then finally, they worked on enabling the self-service. The more you could have one person do, the quicker it was going to happen. They then did discuss some of their net results of the transformation, and they did have increases in their campaign execution like we were seeing. They quoted a case where they previously, before, when these cumulative jackpots reached new heights, they weren't able to react to those because they were quick events, and now they were, and they were able to send out much more meaningful, timely messaging to the customers. As mentioned before, they saw a 32-hour per account manager saving on their onboarding actions. They also discussed their ability to do hyper-personalization. They were able to create campaigns that had lots of variable content within them and creating up to 2,000 different combinations of that one email. And that campaign saw a boost in its click rate by 128%. So a real big number. There was also a journey that was discussed with 32 touch points along the way that one person was able to turn around in 2 weeks, where before that would have been 6 months worth of work. So all of this cumulatively, having the single marketer have the autonomy meant that that one person stayed engaged in the campaign and they really had ownership. They felt empowered and they could see their campaign from beginning to end and get a real sense of accomplishment that they were helping the bottom line and helping move things forward. And to me, that was the most impactful part of their whole conversation, that they were able to get their team members more excited about doing their job as marketers. And I think that's one of the challenges we all have with marketing operations is how can we move people from just doing kind of the boring mechanical click work, but really actually doing the marketing, thinking about what's going to be best for our customers, thinking about what's going to be best for our bottom line. So anyway, thanks for joining us. I think this was a real nice talk, and I encourage you to take a listen and see what you got out of it. And again, thanks for listening.